so amazed. How long can you go, baby? At last to my body.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk podcast. And today I got my good girlfriend Madison.
Hi guys.
Y'all give her a round of applause. So, today's episode we're gonna be talking about daddy issues. We chose this topic because I feel like that this generation today, um, I feel like that a lot of us doesn't close that chapter of what we experienced from our daddy issues. So I feel like this episode will basically just give you like encouragement to like acknowledge or even just understand where your daddy issues can come from, and maybe we all share the same trauma.
Yeah.
Because you never know when you open up about your trauma, you're like, oh my god, you went through that too, and like I just feel like we're all here for each other. Okay, so girl power for real.
Yeah.
Madison. So, speaking of daddy issues, how do you feel about the topic daddy issues? Like, how do you feel like that it affects society today?
So for me personally, I feel like growing up, I always knew like, okay, I had these struggles with my dad.
Right.
We were kind of like always at odds, and I just couldn't understand why. And then when I got older and I moved to Houston and I made friends and I started opening up, and just even in my relationship, I was like, wow, this really has an effect on everything.
Right.
Like,
So, like, when you first acknowledged that you like had anything that like related to daddy issues, like, did you want to immediately like fix it as of like just come into contact to fixing the solution, or like was it something you just had to like analyze over time? Like, what was your first encounter of like something you could just like say like
yeah.
that brought it out?
Honestly, I feel like my first encounter where I was like, when I made the acknowledgement of it was before I moved.
Really?
And that was when I was like, honestly, I don't think I can have you in my life.
Wow.
Because I was like, obviously, I didn't understand those feelings that were coming up.
Right.
But in that moment, I was just like, I want to get as far away from here as possible.
Right.
Because I don't see this relationship bringing anything positive to my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was like basically your big move away from home that made you
Yeah.
realize. I get that too, because it gives you time to like space out the fact that things that you just probably haven't reflected on
Yeah.
earlier in life. Sometimes like being away from that person kind of gives you more analyzation about, you know, how things could have affected you, or how things, you know, you just never sat down and thought about like, hey, that bothered me for real. You know,
For real, yeah.
I can go back to my situation with my daddy. Like, my daddy wasn't big on communicating well. Like, he just always expressed himself when he's like with frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me at the age of 23 right now to finally get my answer. And I'm like, Daddy, why are you like always yelling? Like,
Yeah.
why are you so, you want the hookah? I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're okay.
But I'm like, Dad, why are you always yelling? Like, why are you so frustrated? Like, why you can't never get your point? And I even caught myself communicating that way. Even as growing up, I was communicating. I'm like, without getting my point across, I had to yell, I had to scream, I had to shout. And it's like over time, I'm like, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's not how I should communicate. And he finally gave me the answer. I'm just not going to put his personal business out there, but he gave me the answer, and it started from home within where he came from.
Yeah.
And over time, of course, he didn't be the one to change it because he brought it into his household, but he have children that, you know, just basically is trying to get that healthier version of themselves and healthier lifestyle. So like, it took for me to give him the recognition of what he's doing. And after that, I ain't gonna lie, my daddy has been like communicating a little better, like recently. Like, he's been trying to communicate better. So it's like sometimes that parents need that reflection, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm my parents' firstborn. So everything that I was expressing to my dad specifically about like how he communicates with me, how our relationship together, how he interacts with me, he was very like, you know, stuck in his ways at first, but because he loves me and because that relationship is something he wants, he
Right.
definitely has made huge adjustments to be better about it now.
Right.
So it's like my younger siblings, they don't get to experience the heaviness that I did because
Right.
I like, you know, they're making a conscious effort. Well, him specifically is making a conscious effort to be like just nicer in his approach.
Right.
Because he's like, okay, this affects them.
Right.
Even though they're young, it still affects them.
And you know what? That's good too that he actually just, you know, like
Yeah.
for his child, make that sacrifice to change his ways or just accommodate some things on how he personally feel for the sake of the love of your children. I think that is very beautiful. And that's why too, I feel like a lot of girls who don't have their dad, we're coming in contact with daddy issues because we're tending to find guys or find relationships and things to try to basically cover up our daddy issues. Sometimes to include myself, my past relationships, I noticed I had my daddy issues in them. Like I didn't know how to communicate for one, and then two, like my dad was very materialistic as a child instead of sometimes I just needed a hug. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was never about like, oh, my daddy can buy me this and that, and I'm happy. Yeah, you know, daddy, I'm sad. I need a hug.
Right.
And it was like I had to just like basically over time, I caught myself looking for that love I was wanting in relationships and guys, and it's like I kept getting treated like crap.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I'm just in a place of like in that timing, just trying to get myself together and get my thoughts on the right path of where I should be. You know?
Yeah. I definitely think it has just a lot to do with like once you recognize that you have those issues, it's like just like we expect our dads to make a conscious effort to switch and change those behaviors that were just stuck. It's like literally stuck in their ways. We have to now practice that what we preach and do that to reverse whatever trauma we have to not bleed into our relationships now and, you know, going forward. So I get that wholeheartedly. I get that about relationships. So
I have a question for you. Yes. You are in a relationship.
Yes.
So have there been like situations to where like your daddy issues, you actually caught yourself like dealing with them and you're like, let me catch myself and like, you know, just like how do you handle those situations? Like,
yeah, so because of my issues with my dad, I feel like I was super like headstrong of a woman. I'm super independent, like F a man, I don't need a man. Like, no, you're not gonna put that toxic masculinity onto me.
Yeah.
And so even though I'm in a relationship with a man, like for our first stage of living together, it was very hard because I was not hearing it. Like, you don't understand me, bye. I don't care. Because that's how I was with my dad. Literally so quick to leave like the state, you know?
Wow.
So
you don't get down. You don't.
No, I was just like over it, and it was like really, really hard for me to just exist in my own femininity.
Wow.
And so with him, it definitely took a lot of arguing and crying, me leaving, all of that, to where I was like, you know what? I can't keep looking at him. I really got to look at myself, because say I left my man.
Right.
The next guy I get with, I'm going to have the same problems.
Right.
It's never going to be fixed. And
so Madison, with that being said, like, do you feel like a lot of the girls in this society today, like, do you feel like they like project their daddy issues on their relationships? Like, do you agree to that?
I don't know how to answer that, because I'm not really sure what their issues are, like how they stem. Everybody's are different. But I will say that the mindset I had of like, if you don't give me what I want, I'm leaving. If you don't understand me on the first try, I'm leaving. Like, that's toxic from my side.
Yes, I agree.
And there's a lot of that now.
Right, I agree with that.
You know, and I definitely think that it could have. In my case, it did. So it could in other cases, but yeah, I definitely think it.
Yeah, I agree with that too, and I said it to say because a part of my reason too, as I was saying, like I was having issues like with guys, and it was like I would blame them like, it's your fault. You're not like I wasn't big on communicating.
Yeah.
I could never communicate how I feel for nothing. Like
Yeah.
I don't care if I like you. You won't know I like you. And I just feel like that was bad. Like of course that was toxic because it's like why you won't open up to like being more feminine. I was really masculine.
Yeah.
It's like I had my feelings on guard. Like yeah, I'm gonna play you, so you could go ahead and play me. Like, but it wasn't like I really wanted to be played. It was like
right.
I want to be a hard ass for some reason, and so I had to understand that like, girl, you're a woman. Tone it down. But it was just that guard up from when I was so defensive and had to argue my case with my father. I felt like
Yes.
so like. I kept this guard up. Like I just was like, look, no man is gonna talk to me crazy. No man is gonna tell me what to do. Like I had to like grow out of that mindset because I'm like, honestly, like you need to let your man lead and you follow.
Yes.
And that was my big of a thing. Like I wanted to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You can't lead too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could just say that from my behalf. Like that's why I'm just so open on doing this topic too, because it's like we just genuinely sometimes don't even recognize our issues and our traumas that's dumping onto people because we haven't faced them or like we're neglecting them or we're steady putting it behind us when reality is still in the back of our minds, replaying every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I feel like you don't even really realize it until you take a look at what patterns are occurring in your adult life. Because maybe when you're at home and you're like around him all the time, he's constantly reminding you that like he's the problem.
Yeah.
But when you step out of that and those problems are still happening and your dad is not one of those two people, you're like, you know, am I the problem?
Yes. Yes.
You know,
and
partially.
Yes, and it could be possibly that like we're both the problem, but like I just like me. I was so caught up in him being the problem, I didn't realize my problem.
And you know what it is too, on top of that? I think it's like he might have been the one who's like starting this.
Right.
From your childhood.
Right.
But like you were saying, you develop these like this tough skin and these like walls and these barriers that you don't realize that now when you're doing that to other people, they're not the ones who were giving you these traumatic experiences when you were younger, and they're reaping the I don't know what you call it, but
like the repercussions.
Yeah, the repercussions from something they didn't do.
Right.
And that's hard to keep people in your life, and you're like they're like, dang, like
just trauma dumping.
Yeah, it's basically trauma dumping without even like realizing. You think you're standing on your shit, but
and it's like really you're being toxic as well. Like, no, I definitely agree with what you're saying, because I even caught myself like even like. And I had a situationship, and like I was just so big on like trying to make him a part of my life more than what he was, and I feel like I had an issue with attachments. I had a bad attachment issues, and it's like we try to push people away that we become attached to because it's like you don't want that hurt to be.
Stop. You hit the spot. You're literally hitting the spot. Go
But
ahead,
like you know, it's just like the attachments that you're like really trying to like. You're not trying to avoid, but at the same time you're trying to avoid because you're like already preparing yourself for that letdown. So I feel like too that came from some of my daddy issues because like I said, like I just couldn't open up and be that little girl in my daddy's eyes. Like, and I'm not making him like a bad person because my daddy's a great man. He makes sure his children good and like you know he's a trying dad, but I just feel like emotionally I needed my dad more.
Yeah, and I like to say that too because like. That's a lot to do with like my forgiveness now. I don't blame him for really anything because he has, when I was a little girl, say like 12, 13 years old, that was his first time being a dad to a 12, 13-year-old girl.
And parenting don't come with instructions.
Parenting is hard. I can't even imagine. Yeah. So it's like I give him grace and I understand like, you know, he was trying in the best ways that he knew how. Right. And he loves me, and you know, so like there's a lot of forgiveness and like being able to like be able to take accountability. And I'm not.
That is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that whenever you drop that like blaming and that like almost hatred, you can kind of see things clearer and like remember that he's a person too.
Right. And two, back to what you was like with piggyback to like off what you was just saying. Oh my God, what? I just went blank.
What about my dad? About his
Yeah, it was something you said that just made me like want to piggyback off. Can you repeat the last line?
Yeah, I was just saying like he's a dad and like he's never been in that stage of life.
Accountability.
Yes,
that's what I wanted to
accountability.
talk about. Yes, okay. My dad had a hard time even when we was younger to take. Sorry, Dad, I'm saying this, but it's true. He had a hard time taking accountability for things. Like he was a know-it-all, and that's where I got mine from. Like I caught myself too in friendships. It can play in friendships too.
Everything.
Like not just relationships. Daddy issues can play in friendships too, because I used to catch myself being a know-it-all, but it was because I had to. Like my daddy was a know-it-all. Like I'm like, you don't know everything. Like at this point, I feel like I'm right automatically because I feel like you're wrong.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So like, I had to self-reflect on myself, and I'm like, really, like you're not. You don't know everything. It's always good to learn. There's always ways of like learning new things. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't always know everything.
Right.
And I used to call my daddy the walking Google, cause he
knows everything. Everything.
Everything.
You
like,
gotta answer for it.
You can, yes, you cannot tell him. Baby, you can tell. He can tell you when it's gonna rain. Okay. Right. Like I'm like, okay, not literally, y'all, but I'm just saying, like like he just I know it all. And it bothered me.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry.
No, I don't want to interrupt. I was just going to say to that point, like, for your example, like, if he said he's going to rain, if I was to go check, like, let me just check to make sure it's going to rain, he going to be like, I told you it was going to rain. You don't think I'm going to lie to you? You know what I mean?
Oh, my God.
I'm like, okay.
That's my dad, too.
You know? So it just always made me feel like, okay, I'm that way, too, now. Like, I stand faithfully in my decisions, but there's room for error. Maybe it's not going to rain anymore.
Yes.
You know?
And he was just a Mr. Perfect. Like, you did this wrong and I did this right. And instead of, sometimes we didn't need that. Like, sometimes just correct me without making me feel like belittling. If you know what I'm saying? Not saying my dad put me down a lot, but at the same time, it's just like, sometimes you corrected me and the way you corrected me wasn't right. You know what I'm saying? Like, with that being said, like, how do you go about, like, healing yourself from issues that you have faced as your childhood? Like, what do you do? What are some steps and ways you can tell the audience, like, how they can heal themselves from their daddy issues?
Well, I've recently just been doing a lot of self-reflection for myself about how I handle things, how I interpret things, how I react to things. I used to have like a really bad temper and shut off really fast, but now that I just like look within and try to figure out what I can work on and fix within myself, it's easier when those situations happen with my dad or my partner, to where it's like, okay, let me focus on how I react.
Right. So much doing the I work instead of pointing fingers at you and you know?
Yes.
So it's not so focused on what you done to me. It's to like, how did I react? Like, how did I react to what you did to me? Matters.
Yeah. And also, like, how it, like, you heal yourself. You can't wait on nobody else to heal you.
Right. And a lot of people think that is the key. You might jump into a relationship, into your next relationship, and you haven't healed yourself from things that you have transpired in your childhood or even in your past relationship. Like, you're jumping into things that just basically, just all in with all these tied situations tied to it, and you're not realizing you're trauma dumping into your partner or your friend or your next person around you, because it's like, so with that being said though, Madison, what do you have to say, something positive for the audience?
Give yourself grace. Understand that this is your first time walking this earth too, and know that anything that you're looking to find or you're looking to better yourself in, you can do it. Right. Just, be gentle with yourself, and not everything is like harsh,
Right. So like, I can piggyback off that and just basically say, like, I agree. Give yourself, as she said, grace. understand that you're not perfect, and understand that too, things that you have dealt with within your childhood, face them. Don't ignore them. I'm gonna get a little personal, but if you've been touched, or if you've been verbally abused, or if you was abused, don't hide that wound. Face the wound. Yeah. And then when you face the wound will heal. Thank y'all for coming. Sorry. Bye. This is the ending. So.
But you got me going crazy. Just to do it so amazing. How long can you go, baby? At last, till my body's